today feels different, not just for XRP, but for the entire crypto market. Because every once in a while, you get a moment where all the noise, all the drama, all the arguments, and the uncertainty suddenly fall away. And you're left with a very clear picture of where things are going next. And today, that picture couldn't be more obvious. For the very first time ever, an XRP ETF is officially going live on the Nasdaq. An actual US spot ETF listed on one of the biggest stock exchanges in the world. Something people said would never happen because of the SEC, because of the lawsuit, because of the confusion around XRP's status. And then, almost unbelievably in the same week, the SEC quietly reveals a new internal initiative called Project Crypto, which aims to rethink how digital assets are classified in the United States and potentially shift assets like XRP under the CFTC as a commodity. If those two events happened 6 months apart, it would have been huge. The fact they're happening at the same time makes this one of the most important turning points XRP has seen since the lawsuit was first filed. And that's why today I want to walk you through everything that's happening, the EFT, the regulatory shift, what this means for institutional money, and why I think we're entering a period where XRP could finally shake off the shadows of the past and step into something much bigger. So grab a drink, get comfy, and let's talk about the moment XRP might finally be stepping into the big leagues. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, I'm Paula, and every single day we go through the biggest crypto stories and break them down in a way that actually makes sense. No jargon, no drama, just clarity. If you like that kind of content, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And a special shout out to the crypto Wolfpack, you know who you are. And if you want somewhere to talk charts, news, strategies, and all the daily madness of this space with hundreds of other people on the same path, the link is down in the description below. Right, let's begin with the headline that got everyone talking. The very first US spot XRP ETF has officially gone live on the Nasdaq under the ticker XRPC. And I want to pause here because this is one of those moments that almost feels surreal when you think about everything XRP holders have been through over the last few years. For the longest time, the idea of an XRP ETF felt impossible. There was the lawsuit, there was the constant back and forth around whether XRP was a security, there were exchanges delisting it, there was this cloud of uncertainty hanging over the asset. So the idea of a regulated institutional grade investment product actually listed on a major US exchange felt miles away. And yet, here we are. The ETF launched at 9:30 AM Eastern, right at the opening bell, and almost immediately we saw a jump in trading activity. XRP's price moved upwards, volume spiked, and more importantly, the conversation around XRP changed. Because an ETF does something very powerful from a psychological perspective. It tells the world this asset is legitimate enough for Wall Street to package it up and offer it to the mainstream. ETF approval is not something that happens casually. It requires regulatory sign-off, compliance checks, risk assessments, custody arrangements, transparency frameworks, all the boring but essential infrastructure that tells big money, yes, you're allowed to touch this now. That's the shift. Institutions don't FOMO, institutions wait for permission. And today that permission was given. Even if inflows are modest at first, and realistically they probably will be, the significance isn't the numbers on day one. It's the fact that a door that was closed for years is now open. And once that door opens, money eventually walks through it. We saw this with Bitcoin, we saw it with Ethereum, and now for the very first time, we're about to see what it looks like when XRP enters the same arena. But to understand why the timing of this EFT is so powerful, we need to talk about the second story. And honestly, this is the part that shocked me even more than the ETF launch. Just as XRP gets its first US ETF, the SEC announces something quietly but incredibly important, Project Crypto, a framework designed to reassess how digital assets are classified in the United States. Now, the SEC didn't make a big song and dance about this. This wasn't a dramatic press conference or a bold announcement. This was subtle, very subtle. And if you understand how US regulatory bodies operate, subtle is often where the real change begins. From what insiders are saying, Project Crypto aims to re-examine token classification, update how regulators define securities versus commodities, reassess the SEC's jurisdiction, potentially shift certain digital assets under the authority of the CFTC. And when you start putting those pieces together, you begin to see why this matters so much. Not just for crypto in general, but specifically for XRP. Because for years, the biggest cloud hanging over XRP XRP wasn't a lack of adoption. It wasn't a lack of use case. It wasn't a lack of technology. It was the regulatory uncertainty. The is XRP a security question became the single biggest anchor on the price, narrative, and adoption cycle. But Project Crypto opens the door for something that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. XRP being formally classified as a commodity. And the reason that's such a big deal is because commodities, unlike securities, don't have the same limitations around distribution, listing, or market access. Bitcoin is a commodity. Ethereum is treated like a commodity. And under this new framework, XRP could join them. And that would mean exchanges no longer worry about delisting, institutions no longer worry about compliance risks, companies no longer worry about using XRP in their services. It would mean the end of the narrative that XRP is dangerous or uncertain, and it would replace it with something far more powerful: regulatory clarity. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The EFT launch and the Project Crypto initiative are not random coincidences. They're happening at the same time for a reason. Regulatory bodies do not move spontaneously. Stock exchanges do not list EFTs without confidence. Institutional products do not launch if there's a risk of regulatory chaos. What this tells me, and what it should tell you, is that there has been a shift behind the scenes. Somewhere in the background, conversations have been had, approvals have been signalled, green lights have been given, and suddenly two major developments that would normally take years to align have landed in the same week. If you tried to script this for a documentary, people would say it felt too convenient, but this is exactly how major market transitions happen: quietly, gradually, and then suddenly all at once. For XRP, this moment feels like the beginning of the suddenly. Let's talk about what all of this means, not in a hypey way, but in a realistic, grounded, market-aware way. Up to now, XRP has lived in a strange space. It wasn't fully embraced by the US regulatory system. It wasn't fully rejected either. It was just existing in limbo. And limbo is the worst place a financial asset can be. But what we're seeing this week is XRP stepping out of that limbo and into the same world Bitcoin and Ethereum have entered. A world where the asset is treated as a legitimate investment product with regulatory clarity and institutional access. When that happens, the entire ecosystem changes, liquidity deepens, volatility reduces, market structure becomes healthier, long-term capital starts paying attention, corporate adoption grows, and perhaps most importantly, sentiment shifts. Because crypto isn't just charts and percentages, it's belief, it's trust, it's confidence. And confidence is exactly what XRP has lacked in the US until now. Over the next few weeks, here's what I'll be watching. Not hoping, watching. Volume on the ETF. Inflows, market depth, options market activity, institutional commentary, regulatory hearings, Ripple's corporate announcements, exchange listings, liquidity corridors. These are the things that matter now, because once the regulatory door opens, adoption follows, and once adoption grows, markets react. This isn't about XRP going to the moon overnight. This is about XRP finally getting the chance to operate in a regulatory environment where its actual utility can shine. And that to me is far more bullish than any short-term price move. If you've made it to the end of this video, honestly, I love you, because this is the kind of content that actually matters, and you are the kind of person who cares about understanding the bigger picture. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment telling me what you think about the ETF launch and Project Crypto, because this is going to be a conversation we're having for a long time. And if you want to be a part of a community where we talk about this every single day, the Crypto Wolfpack link is down in the description. We'd love to have you there. I'll see you tomorrow for another deep dive, because these stories in crypto are only just beginning. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.